Then came the so-called golden solution. We're going to call it the Golden Dome because the president likes the color gold. You can see that in the Oval Office. We'll call it the Golden Dome, and it could cost anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion. Those are the estimates I've heard. By the way, I know a little about intercepting objects in space. It's incredibly difficult, and the laws of physics give the advantage to the offense. Quote, that was Senator Mark Kelly, a former Navy combat pilot and space shuttle commander, methodically taking apart Pete Hegseth's proposed $1.5 trillion defense budget in real time. He didn't rely on political talking points, he relied on mathematics, physics, and one straightforward observation. The Secretary of Defense had requested a figure that seemed to be rounded off to the nearest trillion, a clean, convenient $1.5 trillion, an amount that is strikingly close to what the rest of the world spends on defense combined. If that already sounds questionable, just wait until you hear how Hegseth attempted to justify it. Leave a like if you believe a budget of this magnitude deserves more than a rounded estimate and a name inspired by a favorite color. Then let me know in the comments, does this sound like a serious national defense strategy or simply an extremely expensive performance? The next section only gets more revealing. There it was. Not simply $1.5 trillion, but the far more specific figure of $1.535 trillion. Add 3 digits after the decimal, and suddenly, what sounded like a conveniently rounded estimate is presented as the result of a detailed, carefully coordinated interagency review. Quite the transformation. Hegseth then ran through the spending priorities with the confidence of someone pitching a premium package. Ships, the defense industrial base, munitions, service member quality of life, nuclear modernization, everything was on the list. The underlying message was unmistakable. Point to the previous administration, argue that years of deferred maintenance created the problem, and frame this request as a once-in-a-generation investment, a convenient narrative. Kelly, however, wasn't persuaded. With 25 years of military service behind him, he responded, "I've always supported defense spending throughout my time here. And after 25 years in the Navy, I want to make sure our service members have everything they need. But I think you should go back and examine whether we're funding programs that simply aren't necessary. There are systems out there that we either don't need or that just aren't going to work." A decorated combat veteran and former astronaut had just cautioned the Secretary of Defense that portions of this ambitious budget could be unnecessary or even fundamentally impractical. That wasn't a political attack, it was a professional assessment from someone with first-hand experience. And the costliest issue of all was still waiting to be addressed: the Golden Dome. Kelly wasn't finished with the overall price tag. He dug even deeper, highlighting the conflict at the heart of the proposal itself. A combat veteran who also led missions in space had just pointed out what he viewed as a fundamental contradiction. The proposal pours enormous amounts of money into advanced stealth bombers and next-generation fighter aircraft, while also acknowledging that those very platforms may never be able to get close enough to their targets to make a meaningful difference. The logical response would be to make difficult funding decisions. Instead, the budget continues expanding across nearly every category. Kelly's argument was never against a strong national defense. It was a call for realistic planning. Some weapon systems may appear impressive in presentations and budget documents, but others could prove ineffective once they face the realities of physics, distance, and the modern battlefield. The real question is whether those responsible for these decisions are prepared to recognize that distinction. From there, the discussion moved away from future defense programs and turned toward the Part 4, rewritten. Thousands of strikes have been carried out. Endless footage of explosions has filled the screen, and now hundreds of billions of dollars are being requested simply to replenish depleted stockpiles. Yet the broader strategic situation has barely changed. The strait remains closed, the regime is still in power, and the nuclear material has not disappeared. Meanwhile, advanced munitions are being used at a pace that the defense industrial base cannot keep up with, even as the primary objectives remain unfulfilled. That is not a sign of decisive success. It is a costly war of attrition with little meaningful progress. That is the documented record, not political spin, not partisan drama, the record itself. What the public witnessed was far more than an ordinary confirmation hearing. It became a prolonged examination of a nominee's character under intense scrutiny. A man accused of treating his marriage vows as negotiable, a man who described violence against a spouse as a hypothetical scenario, a man who failed to disclose a criminal investigation and a financial settlement to the presidential transition team responsible for evaluating his nomination. A man whose previous leadership positions ended amid documented allegations of excessive drinking, hostility toward women, and offensive discriminatory remarks, claims that were later supported by independent investigative reporting. Serving as Secretary of Defense is not a television role. It is not a prize awarded for loyalty or media appearances. It is the responsibility of leading the most powerful military in the world and making decisions that can send other people's sons and daughters into harm's way. That level of authority requires a fundamental standard of personal discipline, integrity, and sound judgment, qualities this nomination has repeatedly been challenged over. Senator Kaine did not create these concerns. He simply refused to ignore them. He placed the contradictions before the public and required the nominee to address them in real time. The responses that followed, repeated talking points, appeals to religion, and a consistent reluctance to draw clear moral distinctions, allowed viewers to reach their own conclusions. The remaining issue is no longer limited to a single hearing or a single news cycle. It is whether the Senate, and ultimately the country, is willing to lower the expectations for the Pentagon in light of the record that has now been presented. Now I want to hear your perspective. After everything discussed during this hearing and the information supported by independent reporting, Do you believe Pete Hegseth still meets the minimum standard to lead the Department of Defense? Or has the gap between the public image and the documented record become too significant to overlook? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe accountability and high standards still matter, leave a like and share this video so more people can see the complete picture. This is Political Frontline, where we examine the record and bring the facts into focus. Stay informed, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one. You're watching eSkill Pro. If you found this coverage informative, consider subscribing to the channel, help us reach 100,000 subscribers, and share your thoughts in the comments below.